Welcome to Think About It. I'm Sylvia Henderson, your host, and I invite you to tune in, take what you see and hear, and, well, think about it. So today, we are going to be talking about something that is probably an elusive thing to most of you, and that is it's life balance, that term, and what that means and why it's elusive. And my guest is an expert on that. My guest is Phyllis Levinson, and she coaches women to thrive and has a book called Life Coup, 101 Life Coaching Tips. And we're going to talk about that briefly later. But Phyllis, welcome to Think About It.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm so glad to be here.
And just to let viewers know also, Phyllis and I have a business relationship that involves being in a mastermind that Phyllis hosts. And we just talk about a lot of issues, and some of them do relate to how do we manage our businesses and our time. So I'm thrilled to have you. So let's hit it right in there. And I always ask my guests the first question, which is briefly, how did you get to do what you're doing now?
Well, I am a serial career changer. Being an executive coach is my longest career. I've been doing it for 18 years. If we go back enough years, you'll find I have a master's in city planning. So it was a little bit of a circuitous route, but it all makes sense and it all comes together. And actually it all works towards the same goal. You know, city planning, even though I never actually was a city planner, but I used the degree. City planning is really seeing the whole picture and how all the different pieces of a city or a metropolitan area have to work together. And many years later, when I became an executive coach, it really is the same challenge. It's seeing the whole person, not just one tiny slice of what they are or who they are. And when my clients come to me, they'll come to me oftentimes with a specific challenge, but once we start working together, we see that challenge in the whole picture of their lives. So I've always been a sort of, I guess, a big picture thinker.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you get to start digging down into the things that cause that issue they come to you with.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
So because we're going to be talking about life balance, first of all, what in the world does that term mean? I mean, we've spent years hearing about life balance, and because my audience are primarily business people and professionals and high-level executives, that's an elusive thing. So define life balance.
Yeah. So I will tell you what it isn't, and then I'll tell you what it is. So what it isn't is how most people talk about life balance, and they use the term work-life balance. So we have work, and then we have life, and that doesn't make sense even as a construct. It makes even less sense today because we're all working from home. So it doesn't make sense just as an idea, but it also doesn't provide a roadmap to how one achieves it. And the underlying assumption of work-life balance is it's all about time management. Now, I'm a great advocate and I encourage people to manage their time well and be efficient, but that's just a tiny piece of what it means to live a balanced life. So what I talk about is whole life balance. And I'll go into a little more detail about it, but what I mean by whole life balance is all parts of our life. Work, of course, is part of it, but it's a roadmap. It's a way of choosing how you want to be in balance. And it's a design that anyone can use, and it follows you through your life as your life changes, and it's always applicable and it's easy.
So is there something that clicked for you? Is there a personal experience that was that defining moment where you realize balance just isn't happening and you got to look at your whole life?
Sure. And, the truth is no one can be in balance every minute of every day for the rest of their lives. That's silly because life happens and things happen and pandemics happen and people get sick or you have a death of a loved one. I mean, there's so many things that happen to us that will throw us off balance, good and bad. So it's silly to think that we can be in balance every minute of every day. And I've had those experiences. 12 years ago, I had a very, very, very sick son. And that was it. Not everything else, wasn't even in second place. It was in 100th place, And so, we all have those moments. But when I talk about whole life balance, I talk about it overall. It's the bigger picture of how you want to lead your life.
Now, asking from one coach to another, asking if there's a system, a structure that helps you keep for yourself as well as work with your clients on the whole life balance is almost a ludicrous thing to ask. So I will ask you anyway, because do you have a system or a construct that helps people follow what you're talking about?
I do. And I do call it a whole life balance. What I also call it is the tree of life balance, because the metaphor I use is of a strong tree. And we could think of a tree, or we could think of ourselves as a tree. And so all very strong trees have deep roots, and not all the roots are equally deep, but there are 5 roots that we have to have in our tree. And they don't all have to be equally deep, but they all have to be deep enough so that when a huge storm comes, and life has storms, we bend, we sway in the winds, but we don't break, we don't fall over. And those 5 roots are, and you can remember it because it spells crisp, C-R-I-S-P. So you could think of your tree as an apple tree with crisp apples, I suppose. And the C stands for creative. We all have to have a creative part of our lives. I'm not talking about being an artist. I'm talking about having some sort of a creative outlet that, because the more creative we are, the better problem solvers we are. We think outside the box. It's a stress reliever. It serves many, many purposes. That's the C. The R is relationships. We all want to have close friends, family, colleagues. So the R stands for relationships. I stands for intellectual. Now, for most of us, our jobs are challenging and we're always learning, and that covers a lot of the intellectual, but there's more to that. There's just always learning about things outside of your career. It's just being a lifelong learner. And the S is spiritual. By spiritual, I don't mean religion, although if you're a person of faith, your religion probably would cover much of this. But by spiritual, I mean thinking and acting on something beyond you. When my kids were growing up, I used to say that they had to care about something beyond our front yard, about people, about the world, and taking action. It doesn't have to be big. It could be checking in on an elderly person down the street who lives alone. But it can also be much bigger. You can be volunteering. It's more than just writing a check, although I encourage all of you to write checks. Okay, but it's really being part of the bigger world and getting outside of our cocoon. And the P is physical. And that one is taking care of ourselves. That's the whole self-care piece. And it's the usual, you know, it's eating well, it's getting enough rest, it's exercising. For me, it includes meditating, journaling. So there are a lot of ways to take care of yourself. And the P is particularly important because without that, it's very difficult to achieve those other roots, the CRIS. And so these 5 roots never change. And they're true of every human being. So there are things that do change over time. So those are our deep roots. And then we go up from the roots to the trunk of the tree is really our goals, what's important to us. And it could be to be a great mom. It could be for Sylvia, for you and me, to be a great coach. It could be for some people to be politically active or whatever it is, but we all have those. And those are really, you could think through life, but at any one time, it's what your missions in life are. And up from the trunk of the tree are the branches with the leaves. And the leaves are our roles in life. And when my clients come to me and they say, I just don't know how to get it all done, my first question to them is, what are the it's and who assigned them? And so when people talk about the old way of work-life balance, they just have all these leaves, all these roles, and they're trying to juggle them without examining, why are these my roles? And so the old way of thinking about balance is starting from the top of the tree with the roles and not even going down into what you value most. So to simplify this whole process, when you start from the bottom and you end up with your leaves, your roles in life, you get to choose what they are. So, you know, my kids, I'm still a mom, but my kids are older, right? So it's not the biggest leaf on my tree, although I still love them. But we add leaves, we take leaves away. You know, you might be a wife, and then you might not be a wife. You might undo that, and then a few years later you do it again. Now we can simplify this because you're thinking, oh my God, you know, I have to fill these 5 roots and that's 1,000,000 roles. It's not. You can combine things. So you can take a walk, you know, socially distanced walk with a colleague to talk about business. All right, that covers many roots. That covers relationships, that covers intellectual, that covers physical because you're exercising, you're walking. So it doesn't have to be like a million different activities. You can choose 5 things and it covers all of your roles, and it's making your roots of your tree even deeper.
Would you prescribe, I have an echo, but starting with our thought process from the roots up, or is it the leaves down?
You have to start acknowledging those 5 roots, because just like trees, you know, nourishment doesn't get up to the leaves if we don't have roots of the tree, right? So that's why the tree is such a great metaphor, and it really is rooting ourselves. And so those roots don't change. So relationships might change. You know, friendships may change over the years, or you know, one of my deep roots included being a daughter, and both of my parents have passed. So, you know, that leaf isn't on my tree anymore. And it's been replaced by grandmother. She's adorable, she's 10 months. Okay, so so that's why the leaves are always changing. But those roots, that's what anchors us. And if we're not paying attention to those 5 roots, we are going to not be in balance.
Okay. So, I mean, time flies when we're talking these conversations, and we're going to have to take a quick break
Okay.
for a little public service announcement. But this is perfect, because when we come back, we're going to dive into each of those roots a little bit more to further kind of water them. I don't know about these analogies, but so with that, we'll be right back.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
Hi, and welcome back to Think About It. I'm still Sylvia Henderson, your host, and we are still talking about whole life balance. My guest is Phyllis Levinson, and we just finished talking about kind of an overview of a model that Phyllis coaches her clients on and uses herself for addressing that elusive thing called work-life balance. And we already explained in the earlier part why that's kind of a myth. So Phyllis, you talked about the model of a tree, and you went through the 5 roots and the trunk and the branches. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into especially those roots and talk about, again, what each of the roots are or is or whatever, and and maybe a little bit more about why each is so elusive or the challenges with each.
Sure. Well, the challenges of each are the challenges that we all face just as human beings. So for example, taking the intellectual route, and I said that our work covers much of that. That's a huge, huge piece of that route. But we all have challenges about that. I coach senior level women, lawyers and executives who have made it to the top and, in enviable places in their careers. But we talk about things like being more confident in their leadership, being more strategic, knowing when to create a healthier boundary, getting rid of the shoulds, because we're so good at shoulding all over ourselves. So within each route there are those challenges. So that's just taking that one route, that intellectual route. Relationships, that's one of the other of the 5 roots. We have many different relationships, and some of them are more complex and more intimate than others. But we all have challenges. And what's so interesting about this model that I'm talking about is that when a challenge shows up in one route, it often shows up in another route. So for example, when I said about creating boundaries and learning that the word no is a complete sentence. Okay, so if it shows up at work, one of the things I will ask my clients is, does this show up in other parts of your life? And most of the time it does. And I'm not saying these are necessarily huge problems, but it shows up, and it shows up enough to be an irritant, okay? Not a deal breaker. And so that's why when we dive into one route, it often leads us to yet another route.
So how do you how do we make it work? I mean, those are challenges. And by the way, if you missed the early part of the program, the model is CRISP, or is the acronym, I guess, that you're basing the model on. So that was creative, relationships, intellectual, spiritual, and physical. Hey, I take good notes. So with all of this, it still seems a little mind-boggling. So how do we put this all together to create this whole life balance?
Right. So we get to choose our roles. And that's where we need to stop with the shoulds. So we get to choose the roles, the leaves on our trees, those are our roles. We get to choose them to fulfill each of the 5 roots. So women in particular we think there are lots of things we should be doing. And there's guilt, and for moms who have a fabulous career, there's extra guilt. And, you know, and I know what that feels like. And that's where the leaves come in. So for example, and it's what I said in the first half, we can combine roles. So, you know, for that working mom, she can, you know, go on a weekend hike with her kids, and that's physical and relationships. This, you know, it's very easy to combine these. You know, going to a museum with a friend, you know, it's the creative and the relationship, right? Organizing in your workplace some social justice activity or some social good is certainly fulfilling the spiritual, you know, especially right now as we're all dealing with you know, the pandemic and people out of work. There's a lot of needs out there. So nobody should have any problem about fulfilling the spiritual route, because there's so much to be done. So it's not hard. We're doing a lot of this automatically. What I want is for people to do it consciously and not because of some role that was assigned to them. I just want to give you a quick example. So I have a friend when our kids grew up together. She's a fabulous lawyer, partner. She's at the top of her game. And our kids were both in, I don't remember, like 2nd grade, and they were doing this project, and you had to dress up as someone from another country. And I was working from home, and I didn't have as much guilt. And so, you know, we took my son, we put a white shirt on him, we stuck a wooden spoon in his pocket and borrowed a beret, and we said he was a French chef, okay? So she stayed up, because of guilt, she stayed up all night, literally, sewing this, I don't know, this Spanish matadors, I don't quite, it was like so gorgeous. And she was exhausted because she felt like she should do that. That's what I'm talking about. That's where we need to get rid of the shoulds. And she needed to pull that leaf off of her tree.
And I would think, so 2 things strike me. One, it may not be the role itself, but how you interpret that role and how perfect you need to make that role based on that example you just gave.
Right.
And the other thing that hits me is something you said earlier about time management, and this isn't about time management.
Right, right. And listen, you know, we lead full lives, and that's wonderful. We choose to lead full lives, and that's what makes life fantastic. But we want to enjoy those full lives. So yes, we do need to be aware of time, and we want to do things efficiently, but we need to know that there is room. If we do it consciously, there is room to have all 5 roots of our tree really deep and our tree really strong. It just takes intention and not just letting life happen to us.
So without giving away your secrets, because you want to work with people to help them make this happen, but I will ask, what's that first step? I mean, how do you get people to even process all the demands that they have in order to then continue working?
Well, what we do, it happens really quite organically in the coaching process. So, when someone comes to me, it's sometimes to work on a challenge. More recently, I've been having, very senior women, like, in general counsel office and managing partners of firms and that kind of thing. And they're coming to me just because they want a partner to keep them going, because it's lonely at the top. You get to the top, being at the bottom is kind of easy because you can ask a million questions and no one thinks anything of you. It's very lonely at the top. And so it works very organically. It starts with, I want to figure out A, B, and C. And we take a close look at that. And why are A, B, and C the most important things right now? And they often are, but we want to put it in the context. And then it's a matter of presenting A, B, and C to everyone else in the C-suite. And how does one do that and show up powerfully and confidently? So you can see how it just organically unfolds. And with COVID now, and for my clients who do have kids at home, that adds a whole other layer of how do we manage this balance issue. So, it's not that on our first coaching call, we just blurt it all out. We do it one step at a time. And it's like a puzzle, and you just keep putting the pieces together. And by the end, you have this whole picture.
So as we're getting close to the end, we had a couple minutes left. You have a book.
I do.
Don't know if it's about how to deal with some of this or not. So talk briefly about your book and then how people can reach you and what you actually, do for them even more.
Okay. So my book, which I didn't know you were going to coincidentally have it with things for another time I was talking about it. So my book is called Life Co. As you said, Sylvia, 101 life coaching tips, 17 syllables at a time. There's a part of me that's a minimalist, and I really wanted to get tips and information and concepts out there, but I wanted to do it in a form that was so easy to digest. And there are chapters in the book, but you can open it to any page. And people tell me they leave it on their night table, and before bed, they just open it up randomly and they read a few haiku and they're good to go. So interestingly, and this is shameless, it debuted on Amazon in its category at number 9 next to Oprah at number 8. Yes, and I have a screenshot of it framed in my office. I don't think Oprah does, but yeah, that was a very exciting day. Yeah.
And how do people reach you and get the book?
Okay. The book is on Amazon, so you can just go on Amazon. You can search for Life Co, or you can search for Phyllis Levinson, and it will pop up. And they can reach me. My website is phyllislevinson.com, and my email is phyllis@phyllislevinson.com.
All right. And we are just about down to the count. Phyllis, thank you so much for being my guest. And in a 15-second message, what's that one thing you want people to remember?
Live your life. You only get one chance. Live it your way.
And I think that's even more prevalent and aware, and now that we've gotten through, or we're going through the whole COVID-19 situation, there will be more in the future, I'm sure.
Yes.
So thanks a lot for being on the show. And I appreciate you viewers taking your time to tune in and take what you see and hear, and for you to think about it. I'm Sylvia Henderson, your host, and until next time, I invite you to make a great day.